First off, I love my kids.
This is Learning to Dad
I'm the cool dad. That's my thing.
with Tyler Ross.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm gonna have fun, and you're gonna have fun.
Hello, this is Learning to Dad, and I'm Tyler Ross. My guest today is Tim Burch. Tim and I have known each other for a long time, but we've really just kind of started to get to know each other recently. So I know a lot of the things that you have going on now. Like you've got 3 kids, you've been into skiing, you're a project manager at BOA with some high-end luxury renovations and remodels, and you worked on the Extreme Makeover television show. But like, I don't have a whole lot of background or history on you, so I'd be interested in getting started. Like, give me getting out of school and the trajectory of your entering into the job market.
Sure. So I'm a third generation builder, so it was sort of always in my blood. But when I was going to college, I wanted to be an artist.
Yeah.
So I have a BFA degree, which slowly started to morph into more sort of building stuff as I got through the different years at school, and then graduated with a design degree and sort of jumped right in doing that.
What school was that?
JMU,
Oh,
James
cool,
Madison. Yeah.
My sister's at OT school there, right?
Oh, nice. So did that, then worked for my father for a bit in the family business, and then he retired, so I started kind of my own consulting group, which I did for a number of years, and then got involved in some association stuff, and then ended up being the president of the Remodelers Association in D.C. and sort of working on industry things, and then sort of found my way into television somehow.
That's so cool.
And then, the show I was working on, Extreme Makeover, was canceled. So, like the next week, somehow I found myself at my new desk at BOA, and have been there ever since.
So at what point did you, in your professional career, have like the introduction of, Melanie, your wife?
Yep.
Like when did you get married? When did you have kids?
So we actually knew each other in high school. She says I always used to kind of try to hit on her and stuff in high school. I don't remember any of that. I think she just made that up. But anyway, after college, we got together pretty quickly. And it was one of those things, within a couple months, she moved into my bachelor pad, and I kicked all my friends out and, went through that whole thing, which a lot of us, I think, do. And then we got married, and we actually wanted to move to Vermont. So we ski a lot, and that was something that we wanted to do, but we couldn't find work there. Yeah. So we got married up there, and then came back and lived in Fairfax, and then moved to Warrenton in the late 90s.
So did you guys both grow up here? Did you go to high school here?
No, I went to high school in Oakton High School, and Melanie went to W&L. So, in Arlington. She lived in Arlington.
Cool. So how long was it until you got married? Like, how old were you?
I was 26, I think, and she was 25.
Okay. And then when did you have your first kid? 2
years later.
Yeah.
So we were super motivated for kids. Like right off the bat, we said we were the people that want, we're going to have 10 kids and all of this. But we got a kind of a life lesson really quick with our kids, in that our first daughter was born and then she was in the NICU for 8 days. Yeah. All the tube down the throat and the whole thing. Just scared the heck out of us. Yeah. And then had to kind of work through that. You expect your first child, you're going to bring him home the next day, and everything's going to be happy, and that wasn't the experience we had. We were stuck in intensive care for 8 days, and the first probably 3 to 4 days didn't really know what was going to happen. It was sort of touch and go there for a little bit.
No kidding.
So that was kind of traumatic for us, and we kind of became kind of helicopter parents with our firstborn after that. Sure. Just like watching her. And then, the funny and not so funny, our next 2 children, the same thing happened. So all 3 of our kids were in NICUs exactly 8 days.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was, my wife is just got one of those bodies where when you give birth, part of and I'm sure you know this, but part of the birth process is as they're pushing, it sort of pushes all that stuff out of the infant. Like the squeezing pushes the stuff out of their lungs. Well, Melanie would just give birth really quick. It was just a genetic thing. So our kids, we try to like keep them in there as long as possible. But I mean, long story short, we have a plaque up at Fair Oaks Hospital with all of our kids' faces, and we know all the nurses there still, and everything kind of comes to a positive, and it was one of those experiences that sort of, I think for our children made us really connected to them, because that's sort of when the first breath of life, when there's a lot of trauma like that, it's kind of hard to get through, and it changes things a little bit. I'm not sure how to describe that, but
the threat of them being taken away upon not even having them yet.
Right.
Our daughter was born at 34 weeks, and she was like, I remember the room like vividly. There were like 8 nurses there, 3 doctors. They had all this equipment, and fortunately she was born 5 pounds and a couple ounces, and then suddenly the room they looked at her, said she's fine, and left. But I can only imagine the activity in a room like that. Like, do you have vivid memories of like that?
I have total vivid memories of that. I mean, the first thing you probably like look for when you were, especially with the first, is you want to hear that cry. And Chloe, our oldest, wasn't crying, and I'm like, what's going on? And I could see sort of some concern with the doctors' faces, and it was the same thing. All of a sudden, there was 50 people in the room, and I went, oh man, this is not good. But I will say, I mean, those folks are just amazing, and kids are resilient at that age. So if stuff is going to happen, they're incredible at how they bounce back. So anyway, we got really sort of into sort of all of the medical stuff. So much so, in our second, we had our physician had a midwife that was also part of the thing, and when Melanie was giving birth to my son Stratton, I told her, I'm like, hey, is there any way I can, because I was so into it now. I knew I knew all the stuff. I knew what was happening. I said, can I pull him out?
Yeah.
And she's like, sure. So I actually delivered my son.
That's amazing.
And then he was okay for a little bit, but then he had some wet lung. He was the strongest of our 3 kids.
Yeah.
He still spent some time in NICU. And then our youngest, by the time it happened, they said, look, this is probably going to happen again. But we were confident, and everything turned out okay. But
that's amazing. Well, I've got vivid memories of my daughter being born and watching. Like, a lot of people say, "Did you watch?" And they're like, "That seems so gross," but it's like one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And to think that you actually got to, pull him out,
just incredible stuff.
Amazing.
And we're talking about if there's memories that sort of stay with you. So after my daughter was born, after that first traumatic event, I mean, shows on TV or news shows about kids and neonatal thing, I couldn't watch any of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was almost like I had to go through this like catharsis, this therapy with myself to sort of get used to all of that, which now none of that bothers me, but it was just it was just a tough thing to go through.
Yeah.
But anyway, everyone's doing great. So there's, it's one of those things that just sort of happens, and you work through it like other stuff in life,
Most definitely.
Yeah.
So do you have any advice for anyone that might be, sitting in a NICU listening to the podcast? Like,
yeah, actually so that's actually a great question. When Chloe was born, we didn't know what was going on. And the nurses and doctors are great, but they're really busy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's critical, and they don't necessarily have time to kind of tell you about the emotional way to handle that. So when Stratton was born and the same thing happened, there was some other, I noticed there was some other parents in there younger than us that were going through the same thing. And I asked the doctor, I'm like, look, is there like a support group for this? Because this could really help. Because I was talking to one of them, like, hey, here's what happens. They're going to do this, and you're getting a CPAP machine. And like, the doctors explain that, but you don't know really what the outcome's going to be.
Yeah.
And not that we started that, but a lot of hospitals now do that. And I can't, any parent that's going through that or potentially may have a at-risk birth, just look for those groups, because there's a bunch of parents that have gone through the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's so great to hear, because most of the time, and not all the time, but most of the time, as I said, kids are resilient and they kind of bounce back from that stuff. But as a parent, you're so scared because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And just to listen to some other folks tell you, hey, here's what. We were on a list at Fair Oaks. We lived here, actually. We had moved to Warrenton at that point. But for parents to call if they were really freaking out at 3 a.m., we were like, hey, tell them to call us. And the reason, because our kid's plaque is on the like, hey, these kids are made it through. And we did that on purpose because we wanted parents that were in there to say, hey, look, wow, this family had 3 kids come through here.
Yeah, that's amazing. Did you ever get any phone calls?
We did. We got a couple phone calls. I think now, that was 20 years ago or 15 years ago with our youngest. And I think now there's much more, I think probably they right away have support groups for you then or now. But, it's definitely something when you talk to somebody that went through it, it helps.
Yeah, I think that's kind of part of the point of the conversations like this is to help, men who have this definition of masculinity that's been thrust upon them through their environment or their family or history or whatever, to encourage them to, if that's the avenue to be better, make that phone call. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable and have an emotional conversation about what's happening, especially if it's about your kid.
Absolutely.
It's the most important thing you can do is make decisions for the benefit of your kid and to get your ego or history in the way.
And even as they move through, my kids are a little older than yours, and we've had them go through all the stages. I have 2 in college now, and I think you're right. Like, men tend to say, well, I don't have time to get involved in, PTA, that's not for us. But nowadays it's not like that.
Yeah.
Everyone's involved. And it took us, my daughter, my firstborn, had, I think, the bad end of the deal because we sort of didn't really realize that. And as our kids, as each one sort of went through, and our last child that was out in elementary school here, we, Melanie and I were on the playground committee and raised a bunch of money to get the playground going and all this stuff that we're like, man, we wish we would have done that with Chloe too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now we work extra hard to support her whatever she needs. She's making out on the second phase of life.
It's all kind of lumpy. Some kids get the lumps up front. Some kids get the lumps out back.
That's right.
Oh man. So going through that experience, at what stage were you in your professional life? Like, were you on pretty solid footing, or were you kind of introducing yourself to building? Or
when the kids were born, we actually I had just gone off on my own.
Yeah.
So it really was. It couldn't have happened at a harder time because I was missing work and but it's amazing when stuff happens with your kids, you sort of really quick realize what's important, and that other stuff that you think is so, I got to be at this meeting or I have to do that, instantly just gets pushed aside.
Yeah.
Which is kind of I think a lot of stuff should get pushed aside. That doesn't, but that sort of forces you. But yeah, we were starting a company up during that point, and it was, it was tough, but I don't want to, it was still all fun.
Yeah.
But time management became a big thing for my wife, Melanie, and I, is, how do we plan our days so we have enough time to do all the stuff that we want to do with the kids. And, at that point we had a home office, so it was all right there, and, juggling all of that and making sure people were, kids were getting the right attention and, all of that stuff everyone deals with, but it's time management's a huge thing you have to work on.
Is there anything any strategy in particular that you've implemented? I know people talk about batching and blocking hours and things like this. Baby knows no schedule.
So, exactly.
Yeah.
I would do, it was almost like the kids were first priority. And then there were certain times I knew when we had to do things with the kids, so that time would get blocked out. But I had a mentor kind of growing up when I was consulting with this firm in Northern Virginia, and he really worked on time management skills. So I would do that. I would sort of lay the whole day out and then plan, when I can make my calls, which is typically when I was driving, trying to multitask, do that kind of stuff, so that when I was at home, I was not stuck on the phone and doing, not paying attention. It's funny, as you get older, though, I think not only, kids go through different cycles, but parents do too, because then I went through a whole phase where, professionally I was doing all the stuff. I was going to the dinners and, going out with friends and doing that. And there was like a 3-year period, I hate to even bring up, but I wasn't that great of a dad, I don't think. I sort of like, oh, I've got them going in the right way, and sort of, now it's time. Now I got to do this and that and the other, and you have to really sort of focus. And there was like a 3-year period where that my professional life sort of took number one, and I sort of regret that now.
Yeah. What do you think was driving that?
I mean, I think it was, my wife's a really good mom.
Yeah.
And I think I felt like, well, she's got it.
Yeah.
She's got it. And I can go go out and have this meeting or whatever, or go out afterwards with some friends or whatever, and it's okay. And I think I sort of took advantage of that. I mean, this is all natural stuff that people go through.
It's
but
very traditional, the
Yeah.
way the gender roles have been defined over decades.
And we're not that kind of family. We're not a traditional family.
Yeah.
So it was just, I have young friends that I see that are young dads, and they're starting to do that. And anytime I see that, everyone needs their own time away and stuff. But I'm like, look, there was a period in my life where I thought that was greatest. Let me just tell you, it's not.
Yeah.
You really need to make your priorities and make sure you get the stuff sort of where it needs to be. And I don't know.
Yeah. I'd like to hear a little bit about your starting your own business, going from, being salaried or an employee to, creating your own entity, taking that risk, and then managing that risk at the same time as having a baby.
Yeah, that's hard, especially like I'd mentioned, we had a home office, so you can't really tend to get away from it. We would do it in shifts. I know that was one thing. I'm trying to think back of to that time. It was a long time ago, but we would do it in shifts where if I was busy in the office and couldn't be doing, and I'm talking sort of after, the kids were probably in school at this point, but when they were at home, we tried to make sure that both of us weren't in there kind of working together. We worked together as a husband and wife too, which is always hard. Then Melanie actually got a job at one point, and it was just me at home.
No kidding, yeah.
Yeah, and so I took a lot of the, I would run kids back and forth to soccer or whatever, was going on at that point. But it is a balancing act, and I don't really know if there's any sort of process that I thought worked better than others, other than time management, and that's been a continual thing throughout my life. I'm 50 now, and I still spend 20 minutes to 30 minutes every morning sort of trying to map out my day.
Yeah.
A lot of it still, we still have a daughter at Fauquier High School, is really involved, manager of the lacrosse team, a cheerleader, and all of this stuff. And, her life is really busy, and we want to be there for all of that. So it's like, how can I schedule my day to be able to do all of that stuff?
Yeah.
So.
And so that's a theme for us too, time management. And I've found that lists in the morning and having set goals and crossing things off
Absolutely
make a huge difference.
And when you forget to do it, you can really tell how your day goes downhill if you don't have that sort of model to go from.
So what was the environment like that they grew up in? They grew up in kind of a country setting or in-town setting?
Yeah, I mean, we were really lucky that we moved out here. I think we lived in Fairfax when our firstborn was first born, and then moved out here. I think Chloe was 3 and Stratton was like just born. As a matter of fact, Melanie was pregnant when we moved out here. So we were lucky to be out here. We think it was we live in a sort of rural area, but there's a neighborhood around us. But we have, sort of a nice farmette setting, and it was just a great way to raise kids. They were involved in all of that too, horses and things like that. So I think, everyone has their own way to raise kids, but we really felt where we were living was a good place to raise them.
Talking about different ways to raise kids, I'm going to jump to a different topic, which is, how does your parenting style compare and contrast with your wife's?
So Melanie's the enforcer.
Yeah.
That's just the way it works in our family. And then the kids will come to me and go, Dad, Mom said this. Can we really? And sometimes as they're older now, I'm the one that kind of gives in.
Yeah.
A little funny story. So my son's playing club lacrosse at East Carolina, and tuition for out of state's not cheap. So we're figuring out how to pay for all of that and doing all of that. And then he's like, "Oh, by the way, I need $600 for dues." Melanie's like, "No way. it's not happening. You're concentrating. And then he waited a day and then, hey, Dad, hey, Dad, you think there's any way like I could pay you back? And of course, I kind of gave it. I'm like, and then afterwards it was fine. And we talked about it, and that's the way. I mean, we want him to have kind of a well-rounded education and experience sports and playing and having to juggle all of that too. But I think that's the way it works in our house is Melanie lays down the law, and I'm, jokingly, I'm the fourth kid. So it happens with me as well.
That's great. That's funny because I know it's true. Listeners, I know it's true. So with Melanie being the one that lays down the law, I like to ask about like punishment. Like I talk about kids being like a bowling ball and life being the lane, and you put the bumpers in a little bit, but every now you got to take the bumpers out eventually. But the bumpers are like our rules. They are our way of making sure that they get disciplined. Or like, do you have a way of, or did you have a way of kind of punishing your kids when they were out of,
For the younger kids, it was they weren't allowed to see my older kids when they were younger, not see their friends. And as it's gotten, with my youngest now, it's the phone goes away. Yeah. And that's a big motivator because, that's everyone does everything on their phone now. But for the most part, I mean, we've kind of, knock on wood, been pretty lucky with that. And that the kids didn't push us too much. I mean, they experienced and did things that all kids, I think, especially in the high school age, do. But they kind of stayed, they sort of knew, I think we sort of put some values in them growing up that, what's right and what's wrong. But then did try to give them a little bit of leash and not, hovered so much that they can't experience anything. And I've seen that happen with some of my friends have just been like on their kids. And then they get in college when they're away, and within a week they're like in trouble because it's their first chance to do anything, Yeah. And I think it's a tough balance to make sure that you kind of instill those values and monitor it, but still let them sort of experience life and make mistakes and do that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's at 3 and 4, the ages of my kids. I basically have no idea what to do other than just try to talk to them, and logic doesn't necessarily make sense. So it's been, you don't get to play with your iPad, which we try not to give to them too much. But like, did your kids, I mean, I guess the iPhone came out in 2007. So your kids would have been, how old are your kids now?
Well, I have a 23-year-old, a 19, and a 15,
they were pre-teens and really young. They kind of grew up in the world of screens. I didn't. You didn't.
Yeah. So that's a big thing. If they can't use that's how all the kids communicate now. So we would take that away. Yeah, but other lessons I'm trying to think that would happen other than that, like, so our daughter, our oldest, and she probably wouldn't mind that I was telling this story, went away to college, and we were really excited. She got in University of Arizona, and we have a family house out there, and it's a big part of our life, and then just didn't take. She's like, I don't like it here. I don't fit in. Came back here, worked for her, worked here in town, actually at various restaurants and other things for a year and a half. And she sort of experienced life and what it would be to sort of be on your own. And that was kind of a thing we did strategically, is that, okay, well, if you're going to come back, then you're going to be really supporting yourself. Yeah. And she sort of did that, and then figured out she wanted to go back to school, and is now taking after the old man's interior design major at Belmont University, but she paid for the first semester by herself.
No kidding, yeah.
And it was just that, that was kind of tough, because I was like seeing her struggle a little bit, like, oh man, how am I going to do this? Yeah. But we tried to stick to our guns, and now she's got grants for, it's just amazing stuff. She's on the dean's list, and it's just amazing how each kid is different too. And you probably, I'm sure you know that already.
I see it just at 3 and 4. They're wildly different, yeah.
So, the way I would sort of try to parent my son versus my youngest daughter is totally different. So you have to kind of adapt to that. And then there's always, boys and girls difference in how you parent. And
are any of them like you? do you look at that and go, oh,
So
God,
Chloe's my oldest is
Yeah.
exactly like me.
Yeah.
And she's pretty much made the same mistakes that I would, which is good because I can tell her. And Stratton's like my middle son's a combination, and my youngest is Melanie exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And they're it's me and them now at the house. I get ganged up on all the time. Anyway.
Oh, what fun. I just got lost in thought.
It's good, I deserve that sometimes. It's like, I'm definitely sometimes the kid at the house, and those two are.
Well,
Anyway.
so what was your growing up like in comparison to the way your kids have grown up? Like, I know your dad; he's around here.
Yep.
Like, you guys still hang out. Like,
We do.
Was that your relationship to his? I find that people either go total 180 to the way that they were raised, or do what happened to them because it seemed to work.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of similar for me growing up in that my mom was the discipline and my dad was the kind of, he'd be a little bit easier on me until it came to, if you see him, will love to tell you the story, until it came to like the business stuff and learning the business. He was like very strict with me on that. Like, here's the way this happens, and you don't do things halfway. And we've tried to do that same sort of parenting with our children. But, we grew up in Northern Virginia, which at that point was sort of rural. So it's kind of the same sort of setting, because when we were living there later, it was very, urban. So now it's sort of the same setting.
Do you think there's any advantage or disadvantage to like kind of the era that you were growing up in versus the era, like the non-screen era?
I think I would love to have had more of that
Yeah.
with my kids and not have them so tied to the screen.
Mm-hmm.
I understand it. I mean, that's the way, you remember it, like they weren't allowed to, or you maybe weren't even allowed to bring phones or stuff into school.
Yeah.
But now they have to. I mean, they work on, their phones. I, of course, didn't even have a phone when I was in there.
Pocket full of quarters.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
But I wish there was some more of that, because I do see my kids, and when they're all home from school and everyone's kids are home for spring break or the summer or whatever, they're all, there'll be 3 of them in the room and they're all looking at their phone. And I'm like, hey, come on.
Yeah.
Put those things down. Let's go outside, or let's do still,
Yeah.
And I think in general, kids these days don't get that.
Yeah.
We have to, I think as parents, kind of push them to experience other stuff than the screen.
Yeah.
Or punch in numbers or whatever, anyway.
Yeah, there's a real lack of kind of face-to-face interaction that, like we grew up with, and I wonder about the freedom too, because the joke about the pocket full of quarters, I remember in 7th grade, I rode my bike from in town of Warrenton to Orleans.
Oh, wow.
I'm 12 years old, 13 years old. I had a pocket full of quarters and a beeper.
Right.
Mom needed me. She'd know where I was, but
Right.
I'd get within an hour, I'd be at a payphone somewhere and it'd be
right.
fine. But now if it's not back in 5 minutes, you start freaking out.
Everything's so instant, and I think, I'm sort of typecasting, or probably this is unfair to say, but kids, if they can't figure it out really quickly, they start to panic as opposed to what you're saying. I mean, there's ways to just sort of like get through things. We talked about in another conversation about kind of getting away and off the grid.
Right.
So I've told my kid, I told you about that trip I went on when we go hiking in Michigan. Some friends here actually from the Warrenton area. We go every year, but you're just totally unconnected. There's no connection. There's no way anyone's coming to get you. Mm-hmm. Something happened. You're a day out for help.
Yeah.
Which, everyone's like, why are you doing that? But that's why we do it.
Right, exactly.
And it's just
all the reasons you just said.
That one trip sort of saves me for the rest of the year. And then by the time it's ready for it, I'm like jumping out of my skin and like ready to do it again.
Yeah.
Because it's just amazing what that does for you,
How's Melanie deal with that? Like while you're gone, were you able to do that like while the kids were teenagers?
We did some. I mean, we went hiking a lot and skiing and things like that. And we were very active. Melanie is not a big camper. She'll love, she likes to do overnights and things like that, but she knows that It's like, Tim's got to go do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna like him a lot better in 7 days.
She like pushes me out the door, like,
Yeah.
go,
Maybe I need to
please go
start
do.
behaving less, more poorly at home, so that Sarah gives me the boot.
There
Come
you
back
go.
in 3 or 4 days.
But it's amazing, that and to get some of that for kids these days, I think would be only an advantage. Just try to maybe put the phone down for a day and see what your kids do.
Your kid's the weirdo. They go for 24 hours without a phone. That little Burch kid.
Yeah,
What a weirdo.
right. That's right.
The little Ross kids out there, out playing outside, freaking whack jobs.
I text them and nothing. They didn't get back to me.
It took an
What
hour.
happened? What happened?
How about education? Elementary, middle school. Did your kids go to public school throughout? Like, what was your?
They did. So we started down the private school road at first with our oldest. Mm-hmm. And then we moved out here and my wife got involved with the Moms Club, Warrington.
Yeah.
All of them are still our friends today.
Yeah.
And then found out a lot about what, we had heard moving out here. Oh, you got to take your kids to private school. All that's nonsense, I think.
Yeah.
And then, so the kid, we had my son went to Highland for a couple years, but then they all went through the public school system here, and I think it's a good one.
Yeah.
And I think they did really well too. I'm amazed, especially in the high school level, how advanced the kids are. And I mean, really, both, not only academically, but just being able to like carry on a discussion and give presentations. They do stuff, and maybe that's generally now that I don't remember doing in high school.
Yeah.
And, some of my sons and daughters' friends, they come over and it's like I'm talking to an adult and they're like, in 10th grade. It's kind of, I think that's a reflection of what, some of the school system here does, is preparing our kids for real life. But yeah, they all sort of went through basically the public school system.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an awesome review. I appreciate that. My wife's an elementary school, public school teacher.
Yeah.
Actually, she's working at Highland right now.
Yep.
But you look at education as, I think of it as, your biggest education is what you're doing with your kids outside of school, teaching them how to be a human, and then the numbers and letters and stuff like that, they all figure out over time. But the presentations are things that are wonderful. But to think about spending $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year on school, thinking how much does the best teacher on the planet have to get paid to come be my kid's personal teacher?
Right.
We get 6 like-minded individuals and pay a teacher $250,000 a year.
Exactly.
And have the best education you could possibly imagine in 3 hours a day.
Right.
And but I don't know. I'm all over the place with education. But all 3 of your kids, both of them go to college, or you got Stratton in college. Chloe's at JMU.
No, Chloe's at Belmont. So
I'm sorry, Belmont.
Yeah, so I have 2 in college now. Chloe's at Belmont University in Nashville. Stratton's at East Carolina, and my daughter is still in 10th grade at Fauquier.
Fauquier,
Yeah.
right. Does she anticipate going to college?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So she's probably, and my other kids won't mind me saying this, she's the smartest of the bunch.
Yeah.
So she's already kind of researching, and we're pushing Virginia schools with that in-state tuition. But she's talking like Oxford and all this stuff at this age. But anyway, she definitely will be going to college. And anyway.
Do they know what they want to do, or they have an idea?
Yeah. So the funny thing, this is probably a topic to talk about. The funny thing is, all my 2 oldest are sort of following what we did. So
yeah,
Chloe's interior design major and Stratton's a construction management major.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So he's I'm 3rd generation of that. So the thoughts are we'll have a 4th generation, which would be kind of cool.
Yeah, you think they'll come in under BOA, under Dad?
I think one of them's Stratton's going to intern, and Chloe may intern with us too, and work out of our Tyson's office, which has a lot, big infrastructure, and they can kind of get a taste of what it is to work in that industry. But yeah, I think they'll kind of fall into that.
So how do you envision your role as a parent changing? I've changed several times because a 8-year-old is different than a 16-year-old is different than a 22-year-old. Like, how's your being a father evolved?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that before, in that now, with my oldest, it's become kind of like mentor / friend role because they're off doing their stuff. I can't tell them what to do anymore
Right.
to a point.
Right.
And with my youngest, I'm still dad, so it's I have to put like one foot in the younger parenting and one foot in more of the adult and kind of be there for them. One thing that we want to do definitely is as they grow and certainly go through the college years is not hover too much on them and let them make their own decisions, and that'll include the successes and the mistakes too. And just it's the only way they're going to learn. So we try to do that.
And as they get older and you find yourself more in like a mentorship role, friend role, like what do you think you're going to miss most about, being more of the parent?
I miss the it's funny because now Helena has her friends that still came over, but before we had 3 kids sets of friends. Oh, yeah. So our house was like the house where all the kids were at. And then suddenly that went away. I mean, Helena still has her friends over, so we can't wait till those kids come over.
Yeah.
But we miss that. Like we miss the, hey, Mr. Burch,
Yeah.
And
most of them never having any Twizzlers left in your pantry because some kid ate them all.
It's all Stratton's friends call me like Big Red and all this. So I like miss all of that and stuff. But it's the way life is, and it's fun to see them go out and sort of making their own memories and that's a theme also we have is like when they all are around, we're kind of like, all right, what can we do that they're going to remember?
Yeah.
So, make some memories today. Let's make some memories today. And,
that's awesome. That's I think that's the answer.
Yeah,
totally. And
really.
We talked about that a little bit already, but it's a good opportunity to talk about the stuff that you're doing now.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you were doing that, over the course of time when you had 3 kids in the house, like the radio show that you do, and your sponsored ski racing, which is awesome. So is that replacing that time or?
I think there's definitely more time to do that now. It would have been hard to do it with 3 kids at home and juggling all of the schedules and things and just spending time with them. You definitely have more time to devote to yourself, I think, in all kinds of ways and levels. We're really cognizant of not to make too much where we're getting kind of selfish and just doing stuff for ourselves. And meaning, like, here's a trip we could plan on doing together, but we also we want to take the kids somewhere else. We sort of still keep that as the number one thing. And I think you have to kind of do that until they're off on their own and having their families. And, my wife talks about things now, like, where are we going to move, where they're going to want to bring kids back, their kids, she's already thinking about it. I'm like, they're not even out of college yet. Let's just wait a little bit. And you never know what's going to happen. Let's just wait.
So it just goes to show how, like, kid-centric you guys are, like how important your kids are to you, which this is one of my favorite questions. I might have asked it to you the other day, but do you think that your kids will understand how much you love them until they have kids? Like, can your kid love you back as much as you love them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they can, and our kids definitely say that, like, I love you and that kind of stuff, which that's great. But until I really realized what I put my parents through when I had kids, and my kids, were going through whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And I definitely had a better appreciation. So I think that probably does grow when they sort of get into that and realize, oh wow, this is what I did. The
aha moment.
Yeah.
My mom used to say when I was a little kid, I'd throw myself in front of a bus for you, right? It's like it's pretty violent, but that's the high school kid. But now that I have kids, I'm like, you would.
It.
I know you would.
Yeah.
I believe that now.
Yeah. I think that's until you experience a lot of stuff. Like anything in life, you got to kind of experience to understand what someone else's shoes feel like.
If only they'd have kids, they wouldn't have been so shitty in like high school to you or whatever.
We have like another saying, I'm always like, use my gray hair knowledge. Like when they say something and I'm like, no, you don't want to do that. Oh no, man, I know. This is, I can do it. I'm like, look, I've done all this. I went through the rocky road for you. Don't do this. And, at some point they have to just experience their own stuff anyway and learn from it. Context
is so different now. My rocky road is different than your rocky road, just in nature of being 15 years difference. And then another 15 years to your kids is so different. I see why parents forget that.
Yeah.
That, this is what I did, so this is what you should do. Well, the world is different. The environment's different. So that action breeds a different reaction.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of, I found a lot of humility realizing that I'm clueless about what they're going through.
Exactly.
I got 10% of it.
I mean, even though, you probably experienced this because you're in business with your dad too. So, my dad sometimes will say, this is, and I'm like, Dad, we stopped doing that like 20 years ago. Yeah. He go, no, this is the way. No, you don't understand. And it's then, oh yeah, that does make sense. Yeah. But it's funny because, time to teach the teacher. I mean, you have those moments too.
Yeah, I love
and my
it.
kids do that to me all the time, especially with like electronics and things like that. We get all of that stuff. So we have, for what I do, I get exposed to a lot of like high fidelity or smart home stuff. I can't figure any of that out.
Yeah.
So we, suppliers will give me this stuff and I just give it to my son. Say, hey, can you set this up? Tell me, just give me the controller at the end. Show me how to do it. I have no clue.
You have these 45 buttons. Show me the 2 important ones.
That's right.
Play, stop.
That's right.
That's so. What are some of the milestones you think about as a parent looking back?
Well, certainly, our first milestone when the kids were born and sort of the initial problems they had and kind of getting over that physically, that was a big thing that sort of set in motion how we parented and how we thought of our kids. So that's certainly a milestone. And then all the I've been lucky enough to experience 2 high school graduations now too.
Yeah.
Which, I was actually amazed how much not amazed, but surprised how emotional I got during that. Like I was like kind of like up in the stands, sort of hiding back tears.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, wow, this is, you sort of see their whole life flash really quick. And then there they are up on stage getting their diplomas and kind of going off and dropping kids off at college.
Oh,
gosh.
Yeah.
That was tough. And I actually, believe it or not, tend to be the more emotional one. Melanie's the stronger one when it comes to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so awesome though. Yeah. I mean, it's emotional, but it's like good emotion, even if you're sort of sad.
Yeah.
It's like seeing them do things. So all of those things have been great. All my kids played sports, so I have a bunch of memories of them doing that. And, I think it was good for them to sort of experience all that well-roundedness and things. So we remember those things. And then we also remember dumb stuff, like my son and I building a garden in our side yard, like that kind of stuff. And I think, if I was to put my hand on it, I mean, those are the kind of things I remember most, is those little things that sort of stand out.
Yeah. Did you get much opportunity with 3 kids like this? Did you carve out time to spend one-on-one or spend a lot of time together as a group?
We tried to do that. And, with 3 kids, with 2, it's easy to do. Mm-hmm. With 3, it like 3 is the magic number. Everything comes in 3s. And Melanie and I realized that we weren't spending as much alone time with our youngest. Yeah. It's weird that you just brought that up because we did have whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And then we would have, I would have Helena and Dad lunches and we'd go to Wegmans or something and sit down and talk for a while. But when we had 2 kids, it was sort of you could manage that. When our youngest was younger, she sort of just tagged along with everyone. And then she got older and became her own person. And she was still sort of tagging along. Yeah. Wait a minute, we need to, spend some time with her too.
Yeah.
So we tried to, yeah.
That's awesome. My daughter, I think, convinced the staff at her school today that she was sick. Pretty sure she wasn't because they told
wanted to spend some time.
Well, long story short, I got to spend just 2 hours with her at home, and it's like
cool.
I don't remember the last time I did this.
Yeah.
Just with her.
Yeah.
And it was totally by accident, but what a blessing it was to, even if it was distracted, I was working and she was playing, we'd overlap for 15 or 20 minutes at a time.
That's
and
great.
Just giggle and she'd tickle. She's a tickle. She tried to tickle me while I'm trying to work. Hey, come on.
It's those little moments, that's what makes a life and makes the memories. And, my kids, I can't even think specifically. One of them said to me the other day, I think it was Stratton, because when we were just there for one of his lacrosse games in Carolina, he said something like, "Oh yeah, remember that?" And it was some like random thing from like 10 years ago with just him and I, and he brought it up, and I'm like, how do you even remember that?
Yeah.
But like that was like
It meant something.
right at it meant something
That's
to
so
him.
cool.
You know?
Yeah. Well, so what are some milestones looking forward that you're excited to experience?
Definitely I have two that are kind of growing into, two kids that are growing into themselves, as far as, they're mature, they're in college, and then they're going to be off doing their own careers. I'm looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to see Helena, our youngest, where she's going to end up going to school, because she's really, she's already figured out, like, looking at schools already, and like she wants to be a writer. She wants to do, she's kind of like she's thinking, it's like she makes her goals and sheets and stuff already.
Yeah.
And then of course, eventually, not too soon, but having grandkids and stuff like that will be fun.
Yeah. I've never seen my parents light up the way they do with the grandbabies running around.
Yeah.
That's, like you said, not too soon,
Not
but
too
I'm
soon.
already excited about it.
My oldest has a boyfriend that she's been with a while, and we really like him.
Yeah.
But we say, hey, look, you guys are way to just keep the way it's going now,
Yep.
But anyway, we do look forward to that. And I think Melanie especially, like I told you, she's thinking about that already.
She doesn't have to be the disciplinarian. She gets to be the
she'll
shake
love
them
it.
up and give them back.
We'll see if that works. We'll see if that works.
Oh, man. So let's see. What's some qualities about your kids that you're particularly proud of?
All of my kids are really thoughtful, and another thing we sort of talked about when they were really young is, like, if you see another kid that's in distress or getting bullied or something like that, to stand up for them.
Yeah.
Because both Melanie and I had, like, I have red hair, so I was bullied as a kid, and I know how that feels, and all of our kids are really thoughtful when it comes to that.
Yeah.
And I've seen each one in a different way take their friends who maybe there's a kid that they're hanging out with is having some problems, and sort of like bring him into the mix, or her into the mix with the other group, and I'm really proud of that. They're all very sort of artistic in their own way, and Melanie and I are too, so we love that about them.
Yeah.
And they all seem to be getting into the family business, which is great.
That is really cool. And I can see on your face how much that means to you. That's really cool. How about any attributes as a father that you're particularly proud of that you felt like helped you raise kids?
For me, I think I tend to try to, in life in general, stay level-headed. I think most people that know me, like, it takes me a lot to get me angry, and I try to be the one that can calm people down. So as a parent, I like that attribute, that I can kind of, whatever's going on, they know they can come to me and sort of just say, all right, wait a minute, let's just chill out and talk about this for a second. Yeah. And I like that.
What do you think makes you that way? Is that like something that you practice to become that way, or you think you were just kind of born that way?
No, I definitely practice at that.
Yeah.
In my younger years, I did a bunch of meditation and things to get like that. When I first got into college, I suffered from panic attacks.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And so I was forced to, for anyone that's ever had panic attacks, it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something that just, like, out of me, it was a physical thing that just sort of happened.
Yeah.
But then mentally it takes over, and you start going, man, I'm dying. What's going on? And you have to learn how to manage that. So how I did was, I read a bunch of books about it and practiced meditation, and got into a bunch of stuff from there that gave me sort of a bigger picture. I read a lot of Joseph Campbell, if you know.
Sure, yeah.
And sort of, we're so small in the universe that, there's no reason to get upset about stuff, really.
Yeah.
And that sort of changed. I had like a sort of epiphany, if you will, in my early 20s. Stuff sort of changed for me.
Yeah.
In that it doesn't take, and I've been through some stuff in my life for sure, both, professionally and other things, but I don't get, I can manage it pretty well. So I like I like that attribute.
Is that like a structured part of you every single day, like non-negotiable, or?
Not so I don't meditate every day now, but I try to do something for myself. Like I know you're doing your pull-up challenge, so I'm doing this like every month. I try to pick up something like that.
Yeah.
So I have like a crunch challenge, and it's stupid, but it's physical, and it gets me not thinking about other stuff. And then if I do that, I can like manage other things, whatever it is, ride your bike, go, hiking or whatever. We do a lot of outdoor stuff. Outdoors for me sort of makes everything else okay. Like if I can get out and breathe some fresh air and, experience something, look at something cool, and the rest of my day goes much better than if I get stuck at the desk all day and looking at spreadsheets. Yeah,
there's something super grounding about it. Like just to take your shoes off and just stand on the earth for a little bit is amazing. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think people discount the physical too, like what it does to your mind. Meditation in a lot of ways is described as being, relieving your mind of its thoughts or trying to get in between the thoughts or whatever. And if you're moving in different ways, you're exposing your brain to action in a different way.
Absolutely.
And I think I see why people get addicted to exercise, because it's not all physical. There's so much of it is mental. So I appreciate that so much.
Yeah.
So I want to jump into kind of one of what I like to call kind of the lightning round.
Sure.
What are 3 qualities or characteristics that you think would make up a super dad?
Understanding, I think, being understanding, being calm, and at the same time being authoritative, being an authority and sort of laying the rules out.
So actually, in that thought and what you were saying earlier, is there a book that you'd recommend to dads?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of self-help books. So I read one.
I won't limit you to one if you got 2 or 3.
Well, there is, but this is a good one, I think. And it's Care of the Soul. I don't know if you ever, and I'm forgetting who Thomas somebody is the author, but you can find it. This is back when I was a young dad, 20 in my 20s. But that really sort of, it's not about parenting, but it sort of lays the groundwork, I think, and how to know when to be the discipline and when not to be, and to let people make their own mistakes. And because there's so much as a parent, not just parenting, it's interacting with other parents and not being the guy at the baseball field who wants to fight the ref because he made a bad call for your daughter, whatever. I mean, there's a bunch of lessons that book, that was one of the books that I read that sort of set me kind of on my path to be sort of a relaxed parent, I guess I would call myself. Yeah,
mindful, deliberate. Yeah. Okay, so how about some things that are on your not to-do list as a parent that if you did it, you felt horrible, but or wish you hadn't, but something you're so glad you never did?
I'm glad that I do have some friends that never go to any of their kids' stuff, and whether that's something, a play in school or a band recital or a soccer game or whatever it is, you have to never do that. You have to be involved in what your kids do. So I'm glad that I was never not involved.
Yeah. I feel like it's selfish of me to go. Like, I want to be there. I want to see them.
Like, sometimes they're like, you don't have to go.
Yeah.
No, I want to.
I really do want to. This is not about you.
So I had this conversation with my mom recently. So I played high school basketball, and in high school, you want to be like the cool guy. And my mom was the mom that was like in the bleachers, like, go, Timmy! Screaming at the people, like the whole team would look back, like, oh, man. But now I kind of get it. I'm like, all right.
How do we get our high school kids to be okay with that? That's my boy.
Totally. So funny.
Oh, man. So what's a way that you think you can continue to improve as a father?
It's, I'm in the next stage, so I'm not in the same stage as, say, you are. What you can learn at your stage is so much more advanced, and there's so much more stuff there now. So I'm in the stage where my kids are getting older, and I just want to learn how to deal with that.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. I mean, I still read a lot on that kind of stuff, or listen to podcasts. That's actually, I'd probably do more of that.
Yeah.
TED Talks on, how to deal with that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
just life in general, not take everything too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sort of the next thing I want to learn, is how to just kind of roll with whatever is going to come.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be a lot of changes happening in my life soon.
Yeah.
With, as far as my kids go, graduating college, starting careers, getting married, grandkids, hopefully, and all that, and just sort of how to sail through that. And
It's cool that you're actively pursuing that information on like self-reflection, self-expansion, and just, self-awareness.
yeah.
I'm grateful to be continuing to meet more people that are that way, but I don't find that everybody is that way.
I think it's more than it used to be, because there's more avenues to get that information with the internet
definitely.
and all the stuff that you'd have to read a book, and a lot of people don't like to read books.
Yeah.
I don't really like to read.
Sure.
But I do it because there's some, I want to get the information,
Mm-hmm.
but now I can like pop it in when I'm in traffic or whatever. And I think there's more opportunity, but yeah. So I try to tell anyone that's struggling with that kind of stuff, hey, there's a bunch of information you can listen to and learn from, whatever it is.
So what do you think is the role of a father?
I think the role of a father maybe is to be a example for your kids. That you can get into parenting and rules laying and the authoritative figure and whatever, but being an example of what your kids are going to mimic what you do.
Yeah.
And I think I told you that 3-year period where I was like, not around as much.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really, because my oldest that was her formative years when she was like watching what I was doing.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's, you have to be cognizant that your kids are watching you all the time.
Yeah.
And they will end up doing exactly what you do if that's what they're exposed to.
I believe that. So what is your biggest fear as a dad?
That one of them would get hurt somehow.
Yeah, of course. How about your greatest hope for your kids?
But they're happy.
Happy.
Yeah. I used to, even personally, I used to think like being successful and money and all that stuff was what would define that.
Mm-hmm.
But not anymore. I secretly want to be a park ranger.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, that's my dream job.
Yeah.
So whatever my kids, my daughter who's, interior design is doing flow painting now, if you know what that is. She pours paint over, and she's selling it online. She's like, Dad, I could do this, as a thing. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, I tried to do that, and you can't make a living. Yeah. But I'm like, whatever she wants to do, as long as she's happy.
Yeah. And the context is different.
Totally.
The internet,
totally.
You can do almost, Gary Vaynerchuk says, if you're into Smurfs, you can make a real living on Smurfs. That's right.
But that's the big thing, is because, in my business, I see a lot of people that have a lot of money that spend a lot of money on stupid stuff that doesn't make any sense, and they're not happy.
Yeah.
So I'd rather my kids just to be happy, whatever they're doing.
So who's your favorite TV dad?
Oh, jeez. That's a good question. I'm not going to say Bill Cosby. I don't even know.
Yeah.
I don't watch that much of that stuff. I watch a lot of those Alaskan shows, those adventure shows. And one of the dads that's on one of those is pretty cool. Yeah. He makes his kids work and do things. Feel like experience their own things. So I don't know.
Oh, that's cool. If you were going to write a book about your professional and personal life, a biography, what would be some of the, as a parent professional, what are some of the names of the chapters that might be in it?
Jeez. The Renaissance, for sure. The dark days. I mean, you name it. I've sort of, so my, not to get into too much detail, but, I've had up and downs in my career and sort of got through all of them, and up and downs in my parenting too. So I think I could run the full gamut. But for the past 10 years plus, I felt really good about where we're all at. So yeah. I think it's, lessons learned would be one of them for sure.
I like it.
Yeah.
How would you describe the kind of father you'd like to be remembered as?
Like the tombstone thing?
Sure.
What do you want on your tombstone?
Here lies Tim.
Big red. No. Like understanding. Yeah. For me, that would be a big thing.
I think that's a cool one. And then Tim Ferriss does a podcast, and he asks this question: what message would you put on a billboard? And I like to say, what message would you put on a billboard that all the dads on 95 read? You got that much space to deliver your message.
Your kids are watching. That's what would be one.
I love it. All right, so this is my last question. So in the event that this recording lasts forever, and you've got your kids, they all get to hear it, what would you say to them?
I never stop learning. I never stop trying to be a good person. And that meant dad, grandfather, great-grandfather too.
Yeah.
I think that would be the lesson I would give them is no matter how old you are, to never stop learning. And we have a little thing in our family. So my grandfather, we're Norwegian on one side of the family. So my grandfather was full-blooded chemo from Norway.
Yeah.
And he skied, but not like you would think a Norwegian would ski.
Yeah.
He was kind of like a beginner intermediate skier.
Yeah.
So I was skiing with him when he was like 92.
Yeah.
In Vermont. And I remember we were like coming down. It was the end of the day, and he fell in front of me, and he stood up, and I saw his whole nose was bleeding. I'm like, oh my God, did he break something? He's 92.
Yeah.
I'm like, Grandpa, you okay? He's like, hurry, we got to get back down before the lift closes so we can get one more run. And he was like, here he was so old, but he wanted to like practice his turns, to get better.
Yeah.
And he was so happy because he was so old, they gave him season passes everywhere for free.
No kidding.
So that's sort of like, no matter whatever you're doing or how far along you think you are in your career or parenting or whatever, still always so much more to learn.
That's awesome.
And that would be what I would say. Just never stop learning stuff.
That's perfect. I'd be very pleased to say that to my kids.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, man.
You bet.
That was a lot
Thanks.
of fun.
It was
I
fun.
appreciate it.
Yeah.